July 4th, one of America's busiest beach holidays. But on that day, in 2022, some of New York's biggest beaches are declared off-limits. A wave of shark attacks. 6 in just 3 weeks.
Bang. Got hit from underneath.
I yelled to my fellow lifeguards, get to shore, get to shore. Having my feet in the sand is the greatest thing.
Zach Gallo has worked for 10 years as a lifeguard on Smith Point Beach in Long Island.
You know, everyone's just here to have a great day. They feel safe, they feel secure when they're at this beach because they know that when we're on duty, we are always on point, and it's just a really great atmosphere.
Long Island extends some 100 miles eastward from the nation's largest tourist attraction, New York City. Visitors looking to escape the concrete jungle flock to these beaches every summer. And they're not alone.
You know, I never really had the fear of a shark out there. But my attack happened about 30 yards past the shoreline, right out there. It was 4th of July weekend. It was an overcast day, kind of gray.
On the morning of his shift, Zach is leading a training exercise for younger lifeguards.
We were doing a rescue scenario, and I'm a veteran lifeguard. I've been here for 10 years, so I volunteered to be a victim to make sure that our younger guards were on top of their game. I was about 30 yards past the shoreline. About neck deep, I would say. Just treading water, you know, waiting for my rescuer to get me.
Before the team can even begin its drill,
all of a sudden, just feel like this sharp pressure in my hand. And I saw the whole body, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, we're dealing with a shark here. At that point, I get into like survival mode. I start punching, you know, just like, get away, get away, get away. After I made connection with the animal the 3rd time, I felt my chest kind of get blown back, like almost like the wind knocked out of me. And I was just like shell-shocked. I yelled to my fellow lifeguards, get to shore, get to shore. The swim back was the scariest moment. I swam as fast as I could because I didn't know if it was coming back. Here I am, covered in blood. It's a scary situation.
Zach and his trainees make it to shore without further injury. He is rushed to the hospital and treated for multiple puncture wounds. The trauma of the incident takes longer to heal.
I've never thought that this would ever happen to me, but once it did, it took a while to get used to going back into the water.
Before Zach was bitten, there had only been 5 shark attacks ever recorded off of Long Island. In the summer of 2022, there is an unprecedented spike in numbers. Just 3 days before Zach's encounter, a 57-year-old man is swimming when a shark bites his right foot. And then, 4 days after Zach's incident, another lifeguard is also attacked, suffering puncture wounds to his foot. 3 attacks in only 8 days, within a 35-mile stretch of coastline between Jones Beach and Smith Point Beach. the same number of attacks that occurred off Long Island in the past 10 years. Local safety officials closed the beaches and dispatched patrol boats to monitor the waters.
This whole series of shark bites in such a short period of time just seemed kind of surreal. It's unprecedented.
The cause of the disturbing surge is a mystery.
In a place as densely populated as Long Island, it's really important to understand spikes in shark attacks because there are many, many beachgoers who potentially could be in harm's way if we don't understand the reasons for these attacks.
More than 10 species of sharks make their home here, including the sandbar, a bottom dweller that is seldom seen at the surface, the basking shark, that catches millions of plankton each day in its wide-open mouth, and the blue shark, capable of producing more than 100 babies in a single litter. None of these species are well known for attacking people. Another shark in these waters is
Long Island. It's a wonderful research area, a lot of sharks.
John Dodd has been studying the sharks of the Northwest Atlantic Ocean for nearly 5 decades.
Right now we're between Montauk Point, New York, and Block Island, Rhode Island.
His research is based on an approach first pioneered decades ago: shark tagging.
This is actually a pretty good tag still to this day. You've got a capsule here with a number on it, and we also have that same number on the card here. So if we go off and we catch a 5-foot blue shark today, we can put this tag in the blue shark, fill out all the data, when, where, the size, the sex, and release that shark so we can start to put together data on what they're doing, where they're going, and over 200,000 of these have been deployed.
Throughout the years, John has seen a significant increase in one species in these waters.
So one of the more fascinating things that emerged over time is we had the arrival of white sharks.
Great whites can grow up to 20 feet and are the largest predatory fish on Earth. Their torpedo-shaped bodies allow them to swim up to 35 miles per hour. While their two-tone coloring, gray above and white beneath, camouflages them in their environment, making them masters of speed and ambush. This increase in great whites off Long Island could offer a clue to the reason for the attacks.
Over time, over a number of years, they started to discover that there were not just white sharks, but young-of-the-year white sharks, meaning newborns, as well as juveniles.
A recent study tracked several of these young sharks and discovered that they stayed just off the south shore of Long Island from May to October, coinciding with the location and timing of the attacks.
After all this time and all this research, ultimately it was determined that this was in fact a white shark nursery.
A white shark nursery is a coastal area where juveniles can grow without fear of the larger predators that lurk in deeper waters, including adult white sharks and orcas. As the young sharks learn to hunt, they can make mistakes and bite humans. In Southern California, the presence of a great white nursery has been linked to numerous interactions between people and sharks, including a series of 14 frightening incidents in less than 2 years. It could be the case that juvenile great whites are also responsible for the attacks off Long Island.
So I'm looking at pictures of Mr. Zachary Gallo. It helps to look at the wound itself. That tells you something about the shape of the jaws. Each species has a different shaped jaw. Then you can begin to narrow down the list of potential culprits.
Great white sharks have up to 7 rows of 300 blade-like teeth.
Here's the tooth from the upper jaw of an adult white shark, and it has these lovely serrations, very striking serrations on either side of the crown.
These serrated teeth allow great whites to cut through the flesh and bone of larger prey, like dolphins and seals, and sometimes inadvertently, humans. The species is thought to be responsible for up to half of all shark attacks on people. All the evidence collected so far makes for a strong indictment of the great white.
Based on these photos, we can see that they are puncture wounds, so that gives us an idea of what kind of teeth the shark had.
Moyer attempts to identify the species that bit Zach.
These wounds probably were not made by a shark with broad serrated teeth. So that means that we can rule out prime suspect number 1, which is the great white.
Other possible culprits in this area include the short fin mako, the world's fastest shark, which poses a threat through its speed, power, and aggressiveness. And the smooth hammerhead, which reaches maximum lengths of 16 feet and can interact with people due to its use of coastal habitats. Yet it seems the shark that bit Zach was neither of these.
These wounds were made by a shark with pointed, piercing type teeth. There's one shark in this part of the world that has those piercing type teeth, and that's the sand tiger shark.
Growing up to 11 feet long and 350 pounds, sand tiger sharks have tan-colored skin that helps them camouflage into their surroundings. They're identifiable by their cone-shaped snouts and sharp needle-like teeth, which they employ in a remarkable act of predation.
Right now, I'm looking at high-speed video of a sand tiger shark feeding on a mackerel. As the shark is going to bite onto the food, its upper jaw is extending away from its head in a behavior called jaw protrusion. The jaws are suspended beneath the skull, and because of that, both of the jaws can move independently of the skull.
Some sand tigers can extend their jaws the entire length of their snout in less than 50 milliseconds.
In the wild, predation is very, very fast. And if a shark in those last fractions of a second can actually close the distance between it and its prey by extending its jaws forward, this gives them a major predatory advantage.
The other two attacks happened in a similar environment to Zach's, under similar conditions, leading experts to conclude that the shark likely responsible for most, if not all, of the incidents was the sand tiger. The question is, why? Just 10 days after Zach is bitten, the beach is reopened, and there is another attack at the very same spot.
I've been surfing for 29 years. Honestly, the one constant in my life has always been surfing.
Long Island native Sean Donnelly has always been comfortable in the water.
I was that guy who would say it never happened. Even after the lifeguard got bit and I was out surfing that whole week, just telling everybody on the beach, you know, I don't worry about it. It's my daily routine, just having a little surf before work. Literally the last thing on my mind was sharks. I really did not think for a second I was gonna get bit that morning. It happened right over there.
Sean begins his surf session around 6:45 a.m.
That morning was perfect. No wind, the water temp was about 75 degrees. You couldn't have drawn up a better morning. You really couldn't.
He rides the waves for 30 minutes.
The conditions were so good, and there was nobody else out. hit from underneath. It was like a sledgehammer. It knocked me clean off.
A shark bites into Sean's left calf.
I knew how bad of a situation I was in. I had so much adrenaline. All I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. And the second I was back on top of my board, it came back again. In my head, there's nobody coming out here, and I gotta self-rescue. As it got right next to me, I hit it with one really good hard slap.
The blow seems to deter the shark, giving Sean a chance to escape.
But I was bleeding a lot, and I was just worried about going into shock.
Once on shore, Sean manages to find a park ranger who calls 911.
It was just surreal. It just didn't even seem like it was real until, like, I actually saw the chunk missing from my leg.
At the hospital, Sean is treated for a laceration on his leg. His surfboard bears the marks from his frightening encounter.
Your whole life changes after that. It became more and more and more in my head. It still messes with me when I'm out, to be honest with you.
Sean is the latest victim in a surge of shark attacks off Long Island in the summer of 2022. He's not the last. Another beachgoer is bitten while wading on the very same day. 5 victims in less than 2 weeks.
I'm a 10-year guard, and this has never been the case in all my time here at the beach where we've seen this much activity with sharks.
5 days after Sean's attack, the governor of New York orders increased monitoring from the air for any sign of sharks.
Literally, sometimes every 3 to 5 minutes, there would be a low-flying helicopter.
In just a few days, the new patrols spot dozens of sharks just off the coast, prompting multiple beach closures.
In the past, when we have had to call swimmers because we've seen a fin, most people would get annoyed. Now they listen. We normally fly purple flags when we see dangerous marine life. Now we have purple flags that have a shark on them.
The purple flags fly more often than usual these days. A detail from Sean's incident may help explain why.
Right before I got hit, it was, I used the rip current to get back out.
A rip current is a narrow channel of fast-moving water that runs perpendicular to the shore. Each year, these powerful currents cause around 100 drowning deaths nationwide, more fatalities than are caused by sharks. On Long Island, rip currents can be particularly dangerous, but they can also be useful.
Surfers use the rip to conserve energy to get back out. Sharks do the same.
The predator is well adapted for this.
This is a dogfish shark. Today we're gonna look at the radialis muscle of the shark's tail, and that is, we think, instrumental for the animals being able to move, especially in current. I'm gonna cut a cross-section through the tail right here, and at the bottom here is the radialis.
The radialis muscle anchors a shark's spine to its tail fin. It allows the predator to stiffen its tail as it swims, generating twice as much propulsion and speed than a typical fish with a more flexible tail. It also gives sharks the ability to easily navigate strong currents.
Just like a hawk that uses updrafts to soar really high without having to flap its wings. Some sharks use currents as a way to maximize the energy that they spend swimming. They can actually use those currents to orient their bodies and to conserve energy.
Predators drafting in a current expend 15% less energy. For this reason, sharks are often found around these currents. Or at least some types of sharks.
Different sharks will use different currents depending on where they're located. So an open ocean shark, like a white shark, could use one of these really giant transoceanic currents, like the Gulf Stream. But a smaller shark, like the sand tiger, would get lost in a current like that and potentially not be able to find its way out. That same current could actually lead to drowning. Because these sharks don't use these rip currents and in fact prefer to avoid them, it's unlikely that these currents are responsible for this spike in attacks.
The investigation has reached another dead end. A new clue lies within the time frame of the attacks, which all occurred within 10 days of July 4th.
I think all of the lifeguards have a healthy fear of sharks. It's something we always think about and we're always aware of.
Jillian has been patrolling Long Island beaches for 15 years.
2022 was the biggest, busiest year we've ever had. The shift really happens around July 4th weekend. Hundreds of people every day, and there's a lot of boats on the water. Everyone gets on their boats and packs a cooler and just watches the fireworks.
This increase in boat traffic, beginning around the 4th of July, may impact a specific aspect of shark anatomy.
A shark's sense of smell gets a lot of press, but in reality, their sense of hearing is just as acute.
Inside of every shark's skull is a unique hearing system that it relies upon for detecting prey.
We know that sound can travel underwater, just like it does through air, except better. So if you could see deep down, you would see these beautiful circular canals, and that's the inner ear of the shark.
A shark's inner ear is found through two small openings behind its eyes, which lead to canals lined with nerve cells, topped with hair-like cilia. When sound waves vibrate the cilia, the nerve beneath sends signals to the brain.
They can hear very low frequency vibrations. The shark can actually detect it.
Sharks can pick up on low-pitched rumbling sounds from 20 to 300 hertz, like those made by a struggling fish. Researchers refer to noise within this range as a yummy hum. Prey isn't the only thing, however, to make this type of sound.
A lot of man-made sounds, like boat motors, overlap quite a lot in terms of their frequency with sound in the ocean, like prey. So a motorboat might actually sound like a struggling fish.
This could attract curious sharks and put people at greater risk of an attack.
So we know that Zach Gallo was attacked on July 3rd. That's right near the 4th of July when you have a lot of extra boat traffic on the water. And that makes for a lot of noise. When sharks pick up on a sound that's unfamiliar, they will check it out.
Yet, Daily Engel believes there's another component of sound to consider: intensity, or volume.
Just like humans, too much sound is too much. And with lots and lots of boat motors all together in the same place, that could create so much sound that it would actually repel sharks from the area. Because of all that, it is unlikely that this increase in boat traffic is responsible for the spike in attacks.
While boats didn't cause the spike, another form of transportation may be to blame. A startling feature of the city's underground: heads underwater. Sunken subway cars dot the ocean floor off the coast of Long Island, from Atlantic Beach to Shinnecock. This includes the area where the attacks took place.
The Metropolitan Transportation Authority in New York had an idea for what to do with old subway cars. They took more than 500 of these subway cars and they sank them all along the eastern seaboard in a large artificial reef program.
Artificial reefs attempt to recreate some of the functions of natural coral formations. Subway cars, old warships, and even statues are sunk to form artificial reefs.
If they're done well, they're going to bring in a wide range of organisms from small fish all the way to big fish and even up to sharks. That means that beachgoers could come in greater contact with sharks in the area.
Research from 2020 found that the added height of artificial reefs makes them easier for sharks to spot from far away, thus attracting more than 5 times as many sharks as natural coral. And the presence of artificial reefs may even be linked to multiple attacks off Florida's southeastern coast, including one fatality near Pompano Beach.
We're going to look at before and after videos to show the subway cars for the artificial reef program. And this video is a subway car that had just gone into the ocean, and the intent is that this structure would invite a wide range of organisms. In this second video, we're seeing this artificial reef program about a year after the subway cars had been put into the ocean. There is no marine life here whatsoever.
Officials determined that the specific model of subway cars submerged off the coast of New York were made of low alloy steel, which is prone to collapse underwater.
They rusted out and the structure folded in on itself, and it did not provide the habitat that was intended for the artificial reef program.
The condition of these initial reefs is so poor that officials cancel a plan to submerge 500 more subway cars.
The artificial reef program using subway cars cannot be to blame for the spike in attacks off the coast of Long Island.
While scientists continue to search for answers, shark sightings off of Long Island persist.
We started flying a drone every day, usually twice a day. That's when we are on high alert.
People were scared and nervous, and there was definitely times where I didn't go in the water.
Today we're at Cape May State Park.
Dr. Keith Dunton studies the population dynamics of local fish species, including sharks.
A lot of my research revolves around land-based shark fishing, which means catching sharks from shore.
Throughout his 6 years of surf casting research, Dunton also gathers environmental data using an electronic sensor.
This will allow us to know the dissolved oxygen, salinity, and temperature of the water, because it gives us a better understanding of the animals we're sampling today. In the mid-Atlantic, we've seen a gradual increase in temperature change, maybe 1 degree or so every couple years.
This small shift can have a big impact on shark populations.
Some sharks are known as ectothermic, and what this means is that their body temperature is determined by the outside environmental temperature. This is going to affect all other physiological aspects of their lives.
Many shark species must migrate with the changing seasons to waters that are at their preferred temperature. This includes sand tigers, which migrate each year from as far south as Florida, north to New York, and even Maine. In recent years, a new shark has arrived along Long Island's coast.
We're seeing some species show up in the waters off of New York that we typically haven't seen before, and the best example of this is blacktip sharks.
Blacktip sharks are known for the distinctive dark coloring on the edge of their fins. They are extremely fast, agile swimmers, and are even capable of breaching the ocean's surface and rotating 4 times. In search of warm waters, blacktips migrate in huge schools of up to 10,000 sharks. Until recently, they were rarely seen north of Virginia. Rising ocean temperatures have altered this annual trek.
In order for blacktip sharks to find their preferred temperature, they have to go further north. Due to this, blacktip sharks have been found as far north as the coast of Long Island in recent history.
With their arrival, these blacktips might be robbing the sand tigers of their natural prey and forcing them to hunt elsewhere.
All the fish species found in this exhibit are found in the Atlantic.
Kevin Becker is a curator at the Adventure Aquarium in New Jersey. When it comes to catching prey, Becker has observed that blacktips seem to have a key advantage over sand tigers.
The blacktips may be able to outcompete them just because they're a little bit faster, they're a little bit more agile, they're able to catch those food items.
Blacktips can swim at speeds of 14 miles per hour, whereas sand tigers can only hit 12 miles per hour. This superior speed doesn't necessarily mean that blacktips could force sand tigers to seek out new hunting grounds.
We're heading to the top of our ocean realm exhibit where we will be feeding the sharks.
To demonstrate, Becker and senior biologist Lauren Hauber prepare a meal for the aquarium sharks.
We have our ocean realm exhibit, which is 750,000 gallons, that houses our hammerhead shark, 2 silky sharks, and 2 Pacific blacktip reef sharks.
Within this aquarium, these species have created a hierarchy.
We do sometimes notice some aggressive behavior from the hammerhead. He'll chase the sharks down, touch them with his cephalofoil, and then back off. So there's really no predatory instinct or behavior going on. He's just chasing in order to chase. We don't really know exactly why he does that other than just to establish his dominance. We do tend to call him the alpha in this system.
The hammerhead's dominance extends to feeding time.
Essentially what she has is a piece of fish on a very long stainless steel rod. When food enters the water, the hammerhead, he's the first one over to start feeding, and then the smaller sharks will start feeding after that.
This pecking order is not based upon speed or agility, but rather size.
He's just the largest predator that we have in here.
In the same way, feeding hierarchies often occur in the wild. The largest great white on the kill eats first, and black-nosed sharks tend to form groups with others of the same size, even scaring away smaller individuals. This is key to understanding how the arrival of the blacktips to Long Island shores has impacted its resident sand tigers.
Blacktip sharks can usually get to be around 5 to 6 feet. Sand tiger sharks will get to be about 7 to 8 feet.
Since the blacktips are smaller, they're not going to have a lot of interactions with sand tigers. They're probably going to keep a little bit of a distance.
Blacktips are not outmuscling or outpacing sand tigers to prey. There must be another reason behind Long Island's surge in shark encounters. The last attack of the summer of 2022 provides a vital clue.
Kismet's where we vacation every summer and rent a house. The whole family comes, kind of like our big trip every year.
In July of 2022, Michael Haynes and his family continue their tradition on Long Island shores, despite the recent series of attacks in these waters.
We were well aware of what was going on with the shark attacks, but you never think of it as something that's going to happen to you or somebody close to you.
At 5 p.m., Michael's teenage son, Max, heads out with a friend to catch their last waves of the day.
Max has always had a lot of energy and a lot of passion. Once he got the bug for surfing, he was off to the races.
The lifeguards are off duty. Yet Michael is confident that his son can handle himself.
He wasn't too far out, probably about 20 yards. The water was pretty rough. But knowing his ability, I was kind of half watching him.
Mike has no idea that Max is about to join a growing list of victims.
heard a noise and a ruckus. I turned and looked. I heard the word shark. Things got serious quick, and I was concerned that he could go in the shock and die. Next thing I know is I saw Max starting to hobble out of the water.
Michael quickly assesses the damage.
I looked down and I saw Max's foot was full of blood. Max had a deep laceration that went around the top of his foot to the bottom. As a parent, you fear the worst and you hope for the best.
Max is rushed to the hospital, where doctors manage to stop the bleeding.
When I first felt the bite, it really felt like it was just crushing my foot. Just like both jaws around your feet, like that. Felt like a hydraulic press on my foot. A lot of the news, that's all they were talking about, sharks here, sharks there, but I never thought it would really happen to me.
Experts confirm Max was bitten by a 6-foot sand tiger shark.
I'm very happy that it was just my foot, because I know it definitely could have been a lot worse.
Max is the 6th person to be attacked by a shark off the coast of Long Island in less than a month. Twice as many encounters that occurred in the entire previous decade. It is unprecedented.
Summer 2022 is the summer of sharks. It was frightening.
The attack on Max provides a clue that finally solves the mystery.
The day that I got bit by that shark, there was a lot of bait fish, we call them bunker, and especially this summer, there was a lot of bunker activity.
Bunker is a nickname for menhaden, a small bait fish near the bottom of the food chain, which subsists almost entirely on microscopic marine plants called phytoplankton.
Menhaden play a critical role in the marine ecosystems out here in the East Coast. They are this really important link between primer producers like the plankton and upper order consumers like sharks.
Carlisle has been studying the fish and sharks of the mid-Atlantic for over 15 years. During this time, he's seen menhaden numbers near Long Island fluctuate significantly.
We saw historically over the last 10, 15, 20 years, populations of menhaden kind of going down. They have been fished historically at very high levels. They would use these large boats that are called purse seiners that can wrap an area about 6 city blocks with a big net and scoop everything out so you can catch a lot at one time. And that's a real problem.
By 2019, menhaden stocks off New York had plummeted so much that a law was enacted barring the use of these enormous seine nets. 3 years later, in 2022, menhaden numbers are once again booming.
This moratoria on purse seining for menhaden is likely really helping them rebound, and some sharks eat them. So if menhaden populations are coming back and they're becoming more abundant, you can expect that the sharks are going to be drawn to them.
Only certain sharks. For the menhaden population boom to explain Long Island's spike in attacks, sand tigers must be one of the species that consumes them. To confirm, Carlisle and his graduate student, Devin Scott, perform an isotope analysis.
Right now, he's what we call boating a sample, which is where you take this tissue, shark tissue, it's been ground and powdered, and you weigh out a very tiny amount.
Isotope analysis uses a device called a mass spectrometer to identify the chemical signatures of the shark's flesh and help determine the exact composition of its diet.
You are what you eat. So basically, we can get a small amount of tissue, look at the carbon and nitrogen isotope composition. By using that, we can get an idea of what kinds of prey they're eating.
A high amount of nitrogen indicates that a shark is eating at a high trophic level, consuming more complex organisms higher up on the food chain, such as marine mammals. On the other hand, a low amount of nitrogen indicates that a shark is eating lower on the food chain, consuming small prey species like menhaden.
We're going to throw some into the mass spectrometer. Hopefully we'll see some interesting results that tell us something about what sand tigers are eating here in Delaware Bay and the Mid-Atlantic. The first thing you do is just look at the spread of all your samples that you ran, and oftentimes you end up seeing things that just don't make sense. They fall out, and there's a group of animals that look different, and that's the first indication there's something interesting going on. So this is the actual peak of our sample that just got dropped in there. And so once we kind of plot this out, this tells us sand tigers actually occupy a relatively low point in the food chain. They're eating a lot of lower trophic level animals like menhaden.
Sand tigers' preference for menhaden is a crucial piece of data in the investigation. Not just that they consume it, but where.
We're heading down to the beach. Sharks are all over the place in there.
Drone photographer Joanna Steidel has been capturing footage of the Long Island coast for the past 7 years.
I've never seen anything like 2022. I mean, I've seen a couple of sharks over the years, but this summer 2022, they're just everywhere. The sharks have been everywhere.
And she thinks she knows why.
More than 3 years ago, you would see an occasional school of bunker here and there, but not huge, massive schools that just line the entire coast.
In July, she records a stunning sight.
This is a huge school of menhaden fish. It's at least like hundreds of thousands of fish in here. And you'll see sharks coming in. You'll see the fish scatter.
This sand tiger shark is in the midst of a feeding frenzy, just a few hundred yards from beachgoers.
People don't really realize how close the sharks are to shore, because I have seen them right on shore, right inside the breakers.
An answer to Long Island's unprecedented shark attacks emerges.
Menhaden come very close to shore, and when you have the food of a predator, the predator and people in proximity, you're going to end up having an increased chance of interactions.
Although the soaring population of menhaden attracts more sand tiger sharks to Long Island, the presence of these fish is good news.
This is a fantastic thing. This is great. It's great for the food web. They are basically like a snack food for everything, not just sharks, but fishes, birds, whales. This means there's a lot of energy out there for different animals to use, different things for them to eat.
Today, as the population of menhaden continues to rise, scientific research helps beachgoers to be better informed about how to coexist with Long Island's resident shark population.
If you're at the beach and you see one of these big schools of menhaden coming by, you're in the proximity of predators that are going to be eating those things. You need to keep that in mind, because when you go in the ocean, it is a wild place, and you do enter the food chain.
We see bunker pods all the time here at Smith Point. We'll see splashing occurring way out. We have to just make sure that as lifeguards, we keep an eye out. Where there's food, there are sharks.
The California coast. The surf breaks here are legendary. Locals who paddle into these chilly waters know the risks. But in the last 2 years, 7 shark attacks and the first fatality in more than a decade leave residents desperate for answers and scientists on a quest to solve the mystery.
There, he's right there.
"18-year-old Austin Vera is an avid swimmer. who takes up a new sport in early 2020.
I started paddleboarding right when COVID hit, and that's how we sort of stayed in shape.
Austin's hometown is an ideal place for paddlers of all levels.
Santa Cruz, it's very small, so it's the same people everywhere and really tight-knit, and everyone loves to be out in the ocean.
Santa Cruz lies nestled along the California coast, roughly 75 miles from San Francisco, and it harbors magnificent marine life. Like blue whales, the largest animal ever to have existed on Earth, and the highly intelligent orca that hunt here. These waters are also home to at least 21 different species of sharks, including smooth hammerheads with their alien eyes that provide a 360-degree view, big-eye threshers armed with a whip-like tail, and the ancient broad-nosed sevengills that can be traced to the Jurassic period. Most of the time, these majestic creatures steer clear of humans.
We are almost at 38th Avenue, which is right where it happened.
Around 5:45 p.m., Austin and his friend Kylan go paddleboarding.
So my friend and I were looking for a fun adventure that day, and doing that would mean riding way out in the open ocean.
Austin and Kylan paddle together across a line of dense kelp and head off in different directions.
And I started going. For 2 or 3 minutes, it was super fun, and I was having the best time, and I just felt so, like, free and happy. That was the moment when it actually went all wrong. I heard this loud noise like I had dropped my board on cement. I fell in the water.
When Austin breaks the surface, he discovers what hit him.
I saw the huge bite mark on the board, and in that moment, I realized it could only be one thing. I had just panicked. I look back, and I see this huge, like, head pop up. Its left eye was rolled back in white and bloodshot, and it had all of these scars on it. And it was just like I was staring death right in the face. I knew that I had to do something. So I had picked up my right arm, and I had punched the shark on the nose as hard as I could. It felt like I had hit concrete. And I turn around, I just paddle as the fastest I've ever paddled ever.
Remarkably, Austin makes it back to shore unharmed. The 10-inch bite mark on his board shows just how lucky he was.
I could have been gone just like that, and I'm just grateful to be alive.
Shark attacks in the northern half of California are extremely rare. In the decade before Austin's encounter, there was an average of 1 to 2 incidents here per year. Austin is the first victim of 2020. But he isn't the last. Within months, there's another attack. This time on a kayaker. And roughly a year after that, a surfer almost loses his leg. By the end of 2021, there are a total of 7 attacks, almost double the annual average.
When there's an increase in shark interactions, the public wants to know what's going on. Are they aggressive? Are they looking for people? Are they looking for swimmers? Why are they here?
The cause of this disturbing trend is a mystery.
California, 7 attacks in less than 2 years. That's a lot. And so for us, for shark biologists, we really need to know what's going on.
Shark expert Dr. David Ebert begins the investigation by attempting to identify the species that bit Austin's paddleboard.
I'm looking at the overall arc of the bite here, which can be very distinctive between shark species depending on what the species is. And then I'm also going to take some of the measurements between where the different teeth space in here.
His conclusion is chilling.
But what I'm seeing here, this bite mark looks very much like a great white shark.
Great whites thrive in the cool and rich waters of Northern California, but are found in every ocean on the planet.
White sharks are the largest, most powerful predatory fish in the ocean. They can get up to 21 feet long and weigh as much as 7,000 pounds.
Great whites tend to ambush prey by attacking from below and breaching up to 10 feet into the air. It's a tactic typically employed against seals and, on rare occasions, humans.
White sharks are responsible for more shark attacks than any other species in recorded history. They're responsible for 1 in every 3 shark attacks worldwide.
When details of the other attacks near Santa Cruz are analyzed, an alarming pattern emerges.
All 7 of the attacks that happened in Northern California from 2020 to 2021 were from white sharks.
Why are so many more of Northern California's great whites suddenly turning on people? Austin recalls a detail that could prove vital.
I remember standing there and I was foolish and I said, let's go outside of the kelp.
Kelp is a large brown seaweed that can soar up to 175 feet from the seabed.
Kelp forests are very diverse marine ecosystems. They support a wide range of marine life, from invertebrates like sea urchins to vertebrates like fish.
All of which are prey for seals and sea lions, which in turn are prey for great white sharks.
White sharks are often found around kelp forests because kelp forests support their preferred prey item, which is marine mammals.
Austin is certain that his proximity to kelp played a part in his attack.
I know for a fact that great whites like to hang out right on the edge of that kelp line, and I was in the danger zone.
Could this explain the spike in shark encounters? More beachgoers suddenly straying into kelp forests where sharks like to hunt? It seems the answer comes down to a very different creature living in the kelp.
We're at Pillar Point, where we have these gigantic waves, but there's something else out here that kind of hides from the waves, and we're going to have a look for those.
Zoologist Rich Moy has been studying California's marine ecosystem for more than 30 years.
This is what we've been looking for. Actually, there's a couple of them. The wily purple sea urchin.
Purple sea urchins are pincushion-like creatures that make their home in rocky intertidal areas.
Purple sea urchins are very abundant along the coasts of California.
Nicknamed zombie urchins, they feed on decaying plants, algae, and most of all, kelp.
When kelp is available, these sea urchins feed voraciously on that, particularly young kelp that's starting to grow. They chew the kelp right down to the rock.
And devastate the kelp forest.
Instead of a diversity of species, all the way from tiny things to huge things like white sharks, you end up with a dead reef covered in dirt and sea urchins.
To understand the extent of the destruction, shark expert Dr. Toby Daly Engel analyzes satellite data from California's coast. This image from 2008 uses gold dots to represent the location of thriving kelp forests. In a similar image from 2019, just 1 year before the spike, nearly all of these forests have vanished.
Now, 95% of the bull kelp is gone.
Could the destruction of these feeding grounds mean more sharks hunting in the few surviving kelp forests? thus increasing the risk of a run-in with nearby surfers and swimmers.
It may be that the bull kelp played a role in Austin's attack, but out of those 7 attacks, only Austin was near a kelp forest. So it's really unlikely that the kelp forests were responsible for this spike.
As an answer remains elusive, the stakes keep rising. Just 6 weeks after Austin's encounter, another Californian fights for his life. Kyle Pitchford is a pastor and avid surfer who has lived in Santa Cruz for 18 years.
I like the pace of life, slow pace here. The ocean, the waves are incredible here. I love the people. It's a good community of people who care about each other.
In 2020, his best friend is 26-year-old surfboard maker, Ben Kelly.
I went to college with Ben, and he grew to be one of my closest friends. He was usually my first text message in the morning of, hey, where are you surfing?
For veteran surfers, the joy of dropping in on a good wave outweighs the risk.
As surfers, there's always this reality of the ocean's powerful and there are sharks in the ocean. It is always somewhat probably in your head a little bit.
For Kyle and Ben, the odds are absolutely in their favor. Until today.
Ben went surfing that afternoon with a few friends of ours. The sun was shining. The waves were good that day. Ben was enjoying that.
The surfers are almost done for the day. When Ben is suddenly attacked.
A shark bit Ben on the back of the leg.
Ben is pulled under. He desperately tries to free himself. When he resurfaces, his right leg has been torn at the knee.
It just caught one of his arteries. The friend who was in the water immediately came over to help Ben get to the sand, where it just so happened that there's an off-duty first responder.
To staunch the bleeding, they wrap a makeshift tourniquet around Ben's leg.
It was just too late, and Ben had passed away.
His family and friends are devastated.
To lose someone is really hard, especially in a traumatic way, is so unexpected.
In the aftermath, a memorial is held at the spot where Ben first started surfing. A remarkable 300 people paddle out to celebrate his life.
There's a lot of things I miss about Ben, but mostly just friendship. We shared faith together, and so I miss that kind of brotherhood. I think that's even a deeper bond we had. So yeah, I miss him.
Ben's death leaves the local community reeling.
Ben has been surfing for years and was very experienced and knew what he was doing in the ocean, and it just goes to show you it can happen to anybody.
In the previous 100 years, Santa Cruz County had just 13 confirmed shark attacks. Now with Ben and Austin, it's 2 in 2 months.
There was a very eerie feeling to have 2 shark attacks in Santa Cruz within like such a short period of time. It's just kind of terrifying.
The stats for the previous 2 years are even more alarming. 7 encounters in the northern half of California, from 2020 to 2021. Eric Maylander is a wildlife photographer who knows these waters well. On May 9th, the day Ben Kelly died, Eric is flying his drone a few miles away, and he's shocked by what he's seeing.
That day I saw 15 sharks. In my years on the ocean, I've never seen so many sharks in one place.
It's not just their numbers that rattle Eric.
These sharks are so close to shore. It's troubling.
Could Eric's observation be indicative of a wider problem? Why are so many sharks so close to the shore? According to Dr. Ebert, the answer might be found in the shark's anatomy.
We have a great white shark. This is a baby white shark. This one here is probably 4.5 feet long, and it was probably just recently born.
All sharks have an amazing ability to help them navigate by feeling their surroundings.
So along in here is this lateral line system.
The lateral line extends from a shark's snout to its tail and actually lies beneath the skin. It features a series of fluid-filled canals which are lined with microscopic hair cells. When pressure waves reach these hair cells, they vibrate, alerting the predator to movement in the surrounding water. It's the shark version of sonar.
They're picking up frequency, and certainly from a high-speed predator like this, it helps them for hunting. It helps them determine, is this a predator, is this a prey?
And there are certain times each month when sharks may be following more prey as they come in closer to shore.
We do know that sharks will move in conjunction relative to the high or low tide. When you have a very high tide, all the fishes and everything else is active and feeding.
The tides are highest at specific points in the lunar cycle: the new moon and the full moon. During these times, swells wash marine life from the ocean's depths much closer to the beach, turbocharging the food chain.
Invertebrates will come in to feed, and then the fish will come in, and then the sharks will come in to feed on the fish. That's when I can tell you out here from personal experience, you'll catch sharks. You'll catch a lot of sharks.
Ben Kelly was bitten just 2 days after a full moon. Could the spike be linked to the full moon cycle, when sharks are more active and closer to shore? Shark expert Dr. Dan Huber weighs in.
Research on white sharks has shown that during a full moon, they're very, very active predators.
And Huber believes this activity isn't limited to deep water.
Sharks are known to follow their prey. So if a large group of bait fish were able to move closer into shore during a full moon, it's possible that sharks as predators would be following those prey closer to shore.
Shark researchers investigated 50 years of attacks on humans worldwide and discovered a key correlation. The number of incidents increase around the full moon. The trend was strongest among one species: great whites. While interactions between great whites and humans increase around the full moon globally, an analysis of the data from the attacks in Northern California tells a different story.
While one of the attacks occurred during a full moon, all of the other attacks happened at other times of year. The dates simply don't match up.
Still, Dr. Huber's analysis yields a new lead, because the year of the spike does coincide with a massive and unprecedented natural disaster.
Flames now racing through areas that haven't burned in more than a century.
In August 2020, just 12 days before one of the attacks, California saw its first gigafire, scorching over 1 million acres. The fire raged for months, wreaking untold devastation on land and beyond. Chief meteorologist Lee Solomon witnessed the effects of the fire on California's ecosystems.
The wildfire season of 2020 and 2021, I don't think anybody's ever seen smoke impacts of that magnitude.
The fires coughed huge amounts of ash into the air, some of which landed on or near the ocean.
There was one night we were out fishing on the beach, and we looked down and the beach was just covered in black ash. Of course, I'd never seen that before.
Researchers discovered that mixed in with the ash is a toxic blend of heavy metals, including significant amounts of mercury. How might this poisonous substance impact sharks? Laura Garcia-Barcia is a wildlife toxicologist who studies how marine animals are affected by contaminants, like mercury.
For fish that have a higher mercury concentration, we see all sorts of things like impaired swimming performance or liver issues, reproductive organ issues. So we're trying to figure out if mercury affects sharks the same way it affects fish and humans.
To do so, Garcia-Barcia utilizes a small bull shark specimen.
The way sharks accumulate most metals like mercury is through ingestion, so it's through eating prey. Once it is digesting in their stomach, that mercury actually would cross the stomach barrier to the blood, and then it would make it all the way to the brain.
The brain of most sharks, including great whites, is Y-shaped. Just like in humans, different regions of the predator's brain control different bodily functions. And there's one particular part of the brain that mercury affects most.
Studies show that contaminants like mercury accumulate in the forebrain of the shark, which is more linked to the olfactory system, so like more the sense of smell.
A shark's forebrain contains two round areas called olfactory bulbs. Their large size is the reason why sharks are often described as swimming noses. But when these bulbs are damaged, the impact is profound.
We actually think that mercury accumulating in the shark could impair its capability of like detecting prey properly.
So is this inability to smell accurately leading sharks to confuse humans for prey?
Smells are really important sense for the sharks, especially at longer distances because it can't smell it. It could either misidentify prey or simply not be able to detect it at all.
But as Garcia-Barcia notes, when it comes to mercury from California's 2020 wildfires, there's an important factor to consider: time.
As you get more wildfires, a chronic exposure to ash could be affecting water quality and ultimately the amount of toxins and the health in the sharks. However, right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense because sharks will not have a larger contaminant load for probably a lot of years.
Wildfires, though catastrophic, are not responsible for the spike. Yet with every terrifying attack, new clues emerge. Serbian-born Nemanja Spasovic moved to the United States in 2002 and joined his university swim team.
So I have been in the swimming club since I was 5 and, in college swimming competitively. And usually I'm out there maybe 2 times a week.
In all of this time, Nemanja has never considered himself at risk of an attack.
That day, danger was never on my mind. So it's one of the things that you never think about.
Nemanja is not only a seasoned swimmer, he's a crabber. It's near the end of the Dungeness crabbing season, so he's going out one last time. And he's brought his camera.
I was feeling great. The weather was very nice, and I was ready to get my crabs.
When he dives down, Nemanja immediately finds what he's looking for.
In one dive, I see 5 crabs, and that's very rare. happy. I was like, wow, like this is the secret stash. Like I found, you know, it's like a gold mine.
But while Nemanja is hunting, he's being stalked.
I'm starting to surface. And then I see a very triangular nose, two black eyes. I'm face to face with a shark.
The predator bites down on Nemanja's right thigh.
I just felt a sudden sting. So I was like, whoa. For me, like it was just getting to the dry land. I just like frantically kick like with my fins. The worst fear is that, like, you know, shark would come for more.
Nemanja evades a second bite.
At the moment I was able to kind of get on the sand, like, I was just so happy.
A fisherman comes to his aid.
He was able to start calling emergency. And as I opened my wetsuit, I realized this is not a small injury.
Nemanja is rushed to the hospital, where he is treated for 10 puncture wounds. Doctors conclude that one of the shark's teeth barely missed a major artery. But the close call doesn't prevent him from returning to the ocean.
After this, like I was back in the water in 3 weeks, but I became maybe a little bit more hesitant going diving. I'm more aware, you know, sharks are out there, they're present, we're sharing habitat with them. Maybe the next time you go surfing, shark is going to be just, you know, 12 feet from you and you won't even know.
Nemanja is one of 7 people to be attacked by great whites along the shores of Northern California in just 2 years.
Emotions and fear are always very high after something like this.
When you have an encounter with an apex predator, you immediately know that you are not on top of the food chain.
The cause of the surge is unknown, but a clue from the location of Nemanja's attack is about to surface.
So we're about like 20 miles south from San Francisco at this beautiful Gray Whale Beach.
This beach is named after the majestic animals frequently seen from its shores. Gray whales. Gray whales grow up to 49 feet long and often carry hundreds of pounds of barnacles on their backs. They also undertake one of the longest and most arduous migrations on the planet. Megan Peterson is a local boat captain who sees these gentle giants along their journey.
So Northern California is part of what we call the Gray Whale Highway.
Every year, some 20,000 of these mammals migrate south from their feeding grounds in Alaska to calving grounds in Baja California, traveling about 10,000 miles round trip. Around the same time as the spike in shark attacks in the area, Megan and her colleagues started noticing something unusual.
Around 2019, we did start to see that there were a lot of these gray whales that were washing ashore and not making the full migration.
From 2019 through 2021, more than 300 gray whales mysteriously beached along the west coast of the United States, nearly triple the average number. But a gray whale's death may be a great white's opportunity.
Sometimes we'll get whales that are deceased, and we've actually been able to see sharks feeding on those carcasses.
According to Nemanja, there may be a connection between these beachings and the spike in shark attacks.
The fact that you have like a more gray whales and corpses of the great whales, which are a great source of food for the sharks, it could bring sharks closer to shore. It's almost ground zero for sharks.
Dr. Dan Huber investigates this idea.
Decomposing whales could be a major factor in relation to shark attacks because particularly white sharks are known to scavenge on dead whale carcasses all around the world.
The reason for this scavenging may be simple: survival. An adult great white needs 66 pounds of mammal blubber every 2 weeks. And a gray whale weighs upwards of 90,000 pounds.
A whale carcass represents such a tremendous amount of nutrition that it's very common for multiple white sharks to be scavenging on the same carcass at once.
To find these easy meals, sharks simply follow their nose.
This can be a major problem for beachgoers because as white sharks are following this odor plume to its source, this could put white sharks in proximity with beachgoers along the Northern California coast.
A massive die-off of gray whales, attracting hungry great whites to areas where people surf and swim. Could this explain the spike? According to Dr. Dave Ebert, there may be a flaw in this theory. He believes the presence of these whale carcasses may actually deter sharks from attacking humans.
If you have a gray whale washing up on the beach, it's conceivable you could have white sharks following it in to feed on it. But if they're such a big food source that the white sharks are going to gorge themselves on those carcasses, they're probably going to go rest and chill out more rather than be looking around for other potential food sources.
Sharks feeding on gray whale carcasses did not lead to the spike in 2020 and 2021. Another clue about Nemenya's attacker jumpstarts the investigation. Dr. Ebert examines photos of Nemenya's bite wounds.
Looking at the size of the bite radius and the wound on this diver here, it looks like it was probably more of an investigation rather than a full-on attack where there was like a lot more damage to the diver, so it was more of a bite and spit event.
The evidence all points in one direction.
Based on this photo, it's likely that this was a juvenile great white shark that bit the diver.
Next, Dr. Ebert attempts to determine the age of the shark that bit Austin.
I'm using a set of jaws from a 14-foot white shark to compare to the bite radius on this paddleboard here. From what I'm estimating here, the shark was a little smaller than the jaws I have here, which means it was probably about 10 to 12 feet long. It was a juvenile.
And that's not all. As Dr. Ebert reviews the evidence from the wider spike, a crucial pattern emerges.
Looking at all these bite wounds and the bite radius, all of the 7 attacks look like they were all done by juvenile great white sharks.
It's a major breakthrough, but not necessarily good news. Right from birth, great whites must fight to survive. A newborn immediately swims away from its mother, in case the mother sees it as prey. Surrounded by larger predators, including fellow great whites, many babies do not survive their first year. Those that do become apex predators.
At about 10 foot, white sharks change from eating mostly the bony fishes to feeding on marine mammals, seals, sea lions, elephant seals.
Elephant seals. These animals could be key in understanding Northern California's spike, because an adult great white is large enough to hunt one of these behemoths. A juvenile is not. So what happens when a juvenile great white encounters an adult elephant seal? A peculiar video from South Africa could answer that question. In October of 2020, a young great white shark is filmed slowly swimming, when suddenly an elephant seal comes from behind and chases the shark away.
Bull elephant seals know how to be aggressive towards a younger white shark to kind of let them know, like, you know, if you're coming after me, I'm going to make it hurt. And they're very territorial, especially during mating season.
The altercation in South Africa occurred when a juvenile white shark got too close to a rookery. Is something similar happening in California?
The elephant seal populations increased tremendously off California. They've expanded their area. New rookeries are being established where they were not.
In fact, the number of elephant seals in California is exploding by a rate of 6% per year. Are an increased number of breeding elephant seals pushing juvenile white sharks away from their territory towards shore and causing the uptick in attacks? An elephant seal's size gives it an edge. An adult male weighs up to 4,500 pounds, about 4 times more than a juvenile great white.
Yeah, elephant seals are one of the larger marine mammals here in Northern California. They've literally crawled onto cars that have been parked nearby, and they'll just crush the car. I mean, that's how heavy they are.
Even so, a juvenile great white has one big advantage.
Great white sharks are high-speed predators, whereas the elephant seal is not going to generally outrun a white shark.
Great whites can reach incredible burst speeds of up to 35 miles per hour, whereas lumbering elephant seals can only hit 10 miles per hour, meaning sharks likely wouldn't be bothered by the seal's territorial advances and wouldn't relocate near shore.
Chances are the white shark's going to come out on the winning end of that battle.
If territorial elephant seals aren't forcing juvenile sharks into contact with beachgoers, what is? Dr. Ebert has been tracking the population of great whites in this area for more than a decade. And what he's witnessed could blow this whole case wide open.
Oh, there it is, there it is. It's a juvenile shark, put it about 7 foot. It's just a little baby. Although sometimes you refer to these as neonates, which means that they're born this year. But that's incredible to see, like the shark right here.
This sighting is even more incredible because historically, juveniles were never in these waters.
We started seeing these in 2014, and before that, it'd be a really unusual event to see one of these little sharks.
What changed? Could 2014 be the key to unlocking the spike of 2020 and 2021? Dr. Ebert thinks the answer can be found within a mysterious and widespread climate phenomenon.
In late 2013 and in 2014, we had this, what's called the Pacific Ocean blob, this warm water mass.
The blob is a marine heat wave that was formed by changing air temperature and wind conditions. It eventually stretched more than 1,000 miles wide and raised water temperatures more than 4 degrees Fahrenheit. While it led to the devastation of a host of marine life, like sea lions, fish, and whales, it may have actually benefited great whites. It comes down to one of their unique abilities.
Great white sharks can actually maintain their body temperature above this ambient seawater, where they can keep their body temperature 10 to 15 degrees warmer.
This remarkable process is called thermoregulation. It allows adult great whites to live in various climates throughout the world's oceans. Juvenile whites don't have this ability, which restricts their geographic range.
Juvenile white sharks, these small ones, can only elevate their body temperature so much, they're very limited, so they tend to have to stay in the warmer water.
This is key to understanding the spate of attacks in Northern California. Because when the blob moved warm water into these shores, juvenile great whites came with it.
Historically, all these little juvenile white sharks used to be found down in this area, Southern California. We're all the way up here in Northern California near San Francisco. And so you had this shift of these little sharks from here all the way up here. You can get a sense of like just how far these sharks have moved since this warm water event occurred in 2014.
Not only did these juveniles move northward, they did so in large numbers.
Some days you'll count as many as 30 or 40 just in this little area here.
It's a reality that doesn't bode well for beachgoers. Warm water from the blob has fluctuated over time, but it's never fully dissipated. Which means the juvenile white sharks are still here.
We thought at the time, 2014, 2015, oh, they'll probably leave when the water starts to cool down. Well, the water really hasn't cooled down that much, and these sharks have stayed around, and if anything, their numbers have seemed to have increased over the last 8 years. They seem to have expanded their entire nursery area, which was known in Southern California, all the way up to Central California now. And that's incredible. They seem to have taken up residency here.
This rise in the local shark population could spell dire consequences for beachgoers.
We know that juvenile white sharks are more likely to encounter humans because they're smaller. Juvenile sharks can go a lot of places that the adults are simply too big to go. So they can come in shallower in search of prey, and that puts them closer in contact with surfers and divers and swimmers.
This is especially problematic because juvenile whites lack hunting experience.
Sharks do not bite people on purpose. We are not their natural prey. The adult white sharks actually get better at telling the difference between people and their usual prey just by sight. But when they're small, they have to use their mouths to tell what exactly they can eat and what they can't.
This influx of juvenile great whites appears to be a major factor in Northern California's spike. But this population shift has been a gradual one. One final question remains. Why were there so many shark attacks in 2020 and 2021?
I started paddleboarding right when COVID hit. Because of the COVID stay-at-home order, my teammates and I, we weren't allowed to swim in pools.
On March 19th, 2020, just 9 days before the spike began, California issued the nation's first stay-at-home order to battle the spread of COVID-19. Residents were told to avoid indoor spaces. And as the pandemic dragged on, month after month, more and more people flocked to the beach.
During COVID, there was definitely more people in the water in Santa Cruz County because nobody was working or going to school. And it's already crowded here, and it got like really crowded.
It seemed like everybody came down to the beach to either surf or to try surfing because there were so little other things to do.
More people and more sharks.
So it's really likely that this spike in attacks was due to this influx of warm water bringing these juvenile white sharks in, combined with the COVID-19 pandemic that brought more people to the beach.
As this new group of white sharks takes up residency, scientists continue to monitor the situation and attempt to determine if California's present predicts its future.
In Northern California, the shark population, from what we can tell, is probably at a historical high. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the coming decade, if the water cools down or if it continues to warm up, and what that means for the white shark population here.
In the meantime, research on shark population trends is helping to raise awareness, ultimately leading to greater coexistence and safety between sharks and beachgoers. Tales of shipwrecks and sunken gold have swirled around this Florida shoreline for years. It's called the Treasure Coast. But in 2021, it's known for something entirely different. 7 shark attacks in 7 months. Now, a new quest is on in these waters. Not for gold, but for answers.
I was born in this county and lived here most of my life. Everything that you could possibly want is here in its simplest form.
Jeremy Carr has surfed the waves of St. Lucie County for more than 30 years.
The water's warm and always blue and nice to be in. It's just a beautiful place.
St. Lucie County sits at the heart of the Treasure Coast, an area of Florida's southeastern shoreline that stretches some 70 miles. From the Sebastian Inlet to Jupiter Island. The marine life here is varied and abundant. So are the sharks. Whale sharks, the world's largest shark, reach lengths of nearly 40 feet. And makos, the world's fastest shark, hit speeds of 45 miles per hour. Typically, these species don't pose a threat to people. But some of the world's most aggressive sharks hunt here too.
So right there, about 30 yards out, this is where it happened.
It's early morning, and Jeremy is heading out to his favorite surfing spot.
It was a beautiful day. The water was waist high, stomach high sets, and just the perfect time. Got a nice wave from the outside and brought it all the way through. And as I hopped off my board, I went to pull myself back up. And I felt this pressure on my foot. That's when everything happened.
A shark bites down into Jeremy's left foot.
It was just a real quick boom. Very strong, very instant.
The shark releases Jeremy, but he's not out of danger yet.
I got back on my board and was paddling in, but I made sure to keep my feet up vertically so that I wasn't keeping a trail of blood behind me to have a follow-up fight.
Jeremy frantically swims towards shore.
I instantly collapsed, and that is the moment I knew that this was a dangerous situation and it needed to be addressed pretty quickly.
A fellow beachgoer works to staunch the bleeding until paramedics arrive.
The only thing really holding my foot together was 4 broken bones and 1 tendon. It was excruciating pain.
Doctors perform multiple surgeries over 6 days to try and save Jeremy's foot.
The first challenge was just being able to move my toes for the first time. And then, as things progressed forward, I knew that I was probably going to be able to walk again. If anything, it's made my appreciation for the ocean and the natural world more robust, and I appreciate life that much more.
Jeremy's attack is terrifying on its own, but it's actually part of a wider problem along the Treasure Coast. The very same year, a 16-year-old girl is bitten several times while swimming, and a male boogie boarder is also attacked, suffering wounds to his right leg. Between 2011 and 2020, this area averaged just 2 shark attacks per year. In 2021, 7 people are bitten, more than triple the annual average of the previous decade. The reason for the sudden surge is unknown.
1 year with 7 shark attacks is pretty alarming.
Pretty much every tourist was asking us, is it safe? Should I put my children in the water?
It's really important to investigate the factors that contribute to spikes in shark attacks, because this can help us to keep both humans and sharks safe in the water.
At the University of Tampa Shark Lab, Dr. Dan Huber studies photographs of Jeremy's wounds.
We're looking for the position of the shark when it attacked him, as well as the curvature and severity of the wound.
Identifying the species behind this attack may help explain its cause.
On the top of Jeremy's foot, what we see is that the front of the wound where the shark's upper jaw would have come in contact with the foot, is kind of flattened out right here. And that would tend to indicate that it was a bull shark.
Known for their distinctive blunt snouts, bull sharks can grow over 10 feet long and weigh as much as 700 pounds. They thrive in shallow, brackish water, so they're especially likely to come into contact with humans.
Bull sharks are notorious for being one of the most aggressive species of sharks around. They're responsible for about 15% of shark attacks worldwide and are one of the most dangerous coastal sharks on Earth.
Identifying the species that bit Jeremy gives Dr. Huber the lead he was looking for.
It's really relevant that Jeremy was attacked by a bull shark because of where the attack occurred. He was attacked just east of the Indian River Lagoon.
The Indian River Lagoon is an estuary that lies along Florida's eastern shoreline. Starting at Ponce de Leon Inlet near Daytona and ending at Jupiter Inlet near Palm Beach.
The Indian River Lagoon is one of the country's largest and most important watersheds. It's relatively shallow and characterized by brackish water, so not completely salty and not completely fresh.
According to shark expert Dr. Toby Daly Engel, these factors create a bull shark hotspot.
The Indian River Lagoon is the largest and richest nursery habitat for bull sharks in the entire east coast of the U.S.
Pregnant bulls come here from offshore to give birth.
The bigger the mama, the more babies she can have. So a bull shark mom can have anywhere between 1 and 13 pups.
And the pups stick around.
Baby bull sharks will actually stay in the Indian River Lagoon for up to 9 years. It is perfect for a baby bull shark because it's protected from the deeper water where larger sharks roam and where there's tons of small prey, little fish, crustaceans that these baby sharks can eat.
Even when they're young, bull sharks can pose a threat to people.
Baby sharks are born with their teeth embedded in their gums. But unlike humans, it only takes hours for those teeth to break through, making that a pretty effective little predator right off the bat.
The pups even have the same camouflage as their parents, which makes them difficult for people to see.
This is what we call counter shading, where the top is dark and the bottom is light. And that helps the shark to blend in. When it's seen from above, it blends in with the bottom. When it's seen from below, it blends in with the surface.
Over the millennia, bull sharks have evolved to be able to hunt and hide from birth. But the bigger threat to people comes from the shark's mothers.
You can imagine having just given birth to 13 babies. She's probably a little hungry. She's going to be going and looking for high, energetic, value, big prey.
Swimmers and surfers are all sharing these waters with a high density of hungry bull sharks. This insight is crucial. Several of the attacks in 2021 occurred just a few miles away from the Indian River Lagoon. According to Dr. Huber, it's not just how bull sharks use the pupping grounds, but when.
The temperature of the environment has a large effect on the metabolism of animals, and therefore on the time of pregnancy. Big pregnant female bull sharks come into the Indian River Lagoon when the water is warmer in the late spring to early summer.
If the attacks took place during this time frame, it could explain the surge. But when the data is analyzed, only 1 of the 7 incidents occurred during pupping season.
The influx of bull sharks into the Indian River Lagoon could not be responsible for the spike in attacks along the Treasure Coast in 2021.
The investigation needs a new lead.
The Treasure Coast is the #1 place that people come for treasure hunting. This is the go-to spot.
Mitch King grew up hearing about the Spanish ships that foundered here in 1715, leaving millions in plundered riches strewn on the ocean floor.
I found gold rings here. I found gold chains here.
In his search for valuable relics, Mitch has found a potential clue to the cause of the spike in shark attacks.
One day, as I looked down, this large gray shark shot in and actually bit down on my metal detector. So in 2021, with the increase of shark attacks, there's been some talk that it's possibly due to the increased amount of metal detecting here.
Dr. Stephen Kajira explores this idea by examining an incredible ability that sharks possess.
So sharks have all the same senses that we have: vision, smell, taste, touch, all of those. But they have another sense. They have the ability to detect electric fields in the environment. And this electrosense.
A shark's electrosense originates from hundreds of tiny pores located on the top and bottom of its head, each of which is filled with a thick gel.
This jelly is one of the most conductive biological materials known to man. What it does is it enables electric fields in the environment to be conducted down into the electroreceptors. They are among the most sensitive receptors in the entire animal kingdom, and they can detect voltages down to 1/1000th of a volt.
Sharks use this sense to hunt because all living organisms emit low-frequency electric fields.
The great thing about the electrosense on these sharks is it gives them the ability to hunt effectively under conditions when they can't see, or the prey doesn't produce any odor, doesn't produce any movement. The very fact that they are alive means that the shark is able to locate that prey item.
But prey isn't the only thing that emits electrical fields. So do certain man-made items, like metal detectors. Curious sharks can't tell the difference.
A large sunken ship that's corroding is naturally giving off an electric field around its hull, and sharks are able to detect that electric field.
Large aggregations of sand tigers have been sighted hovering near shipwrecks in the Atlantic. Sharks have also been known to bite down on undersea internet cables, and even reportedly destroyed the radar on a U.S. Navy submarine by biting into exposed electrical wires. If metal detectors have a similar effect, this would put nearby beachgoers at risk.
Metal detectors, in theory, would produce a stimulus that the sharks could detect. The problem is that that stimulus would only be detected from about 3 feet away. So these sharks have to be very close to the device before they would even be able to detect it. And as a result, the metal detectors themselves are certainly not providing any sort of stimulus that would attract the sharks to the area.
If metal detectors didn't cause the spike, what did? Another attack along the Treasure Coast may offer a clue.
Beautiful beach. This is home.
Anna Lobb has lived in Southeast Florida most of her life.
I love being near water. I tried Colorado with the mountains and it was gorgeous, but the beach called me back.
There is one beach on the Treasure Coast that Anna avoids.
It has been a year and a month since I've been back here. I feel nervous, I feel anxious, and I honestly never thought I would come back to this beach.
Anna and her 2 daughters meet up with friends at Bathtub Beach.
It was our first time here. We were excited for a new experience.
Anna's 9-year-old daughter, Amaya, enters the ocean around 4 p.m.
She was very excited to get to the water. Amaya was only maybe calf deep, just below her knee. She was just playing with her friends. Amaya had seen the shark fin in the water. She told her friends, and they didn't quite believe her until she had screamed.
The shark's powerful jaws clamp down on Amaya's right foot. Amaya kicks the shark with her free leg. It releases its bite and swims away.
She was hysterically crying, hyperventilating, and in complete shock. Her foot was severed. My stomach dropped. Everything paused. I felt as if I was dreaming.
Amaya is rushed to the hospital. She receives 30 stitches in her right foot. And after 2 months, she makes a full recovery. For Anna and Amaya, the attack has left more than just physical scars.
I thought sharks before the attack were pretty cool, but right now, if I see the live shark or like a picture of a shark, those scare me.
That experience was an absolute nightmare. And I would have never in a million years thought that it would happen to my daughter.
Amaya's terrifying encounter is just one of 7 attacks to rock Florida's Treasure Coast in 2021. More than 3 times the annual average of the previous 10 years.
I've been surfing this area my whole life, and to hear 7 bites in 1 year is a little bit alarming. 2021 was kind of a wake-up call to us. If this trend continues, it's something that we're all gonna have to watch out for.
There are an estimated 15 species of sharks that live along the Treasure Coast. In addition to bulls, these waters are home to tiger sharks, which are named for the distinctive stripes on their skin, and blacktips, which are easily identifiable by the dark color of their fins. But it seems that the species that bit Amaya was neither of these.
Once the shark had gotten hit, it just began spiraling. And that's how we knew it was a spinner shark.
Spinner sharks are named for their habit of leaping out of the water and twirling midair, possibly as a means of removing parasites.
Spinner sharks live in the waters off of the southeast United States. They can get up to about 8 feet long and eat a really wide range of prey, from bony fishes to other sharks and stingrays as well.
This species shares something in common with the species that bit Jeremy, which could be key to the investigation.
Spinner sharks, like bull sharks, can be found in shallow coastal environments.
This habitat preference may be key, because something else was found in shallow waters just up the coast from Amaya's attack. Cocaine.
Cocaine will wash up along the beaches of the Treasure Coast because people are smuggling it nearby, and either they encounter rough weather or they have some reason to ditch their load so that they can make a quick getaway. In 2021, the same year that we had the spike in shark attacks, 53 pounds of cocaine actually showed up on the beaches there in the Treasure Coast. Just have to wonder if it all wound up there or if some of it was in the water.
It may sound outlandish, but as wildlife toxicologist Laura Garcia can attest, pollutants entering the ocean can impact sharks.
We know that hundreds of chemicals end up in our waters every day.
Keep moving straight up.
Sharks are top predators, so any contaminant that accumulates up the food chain will be likely found in the sharks, particularly in urban areas like here. We're trying to look at the effects of contaminants on shark health.
To do so,
They going in?
Garcia Barcia and her team are collecting blood samples from the local population.
Yep, Kurt, go for it. What we've got here is a nurse shark, one of the most common sharks in these waters. So the first thing we're gonna do is measure the shark, and then we're gonna take a quick blood sample from the tail to check for contaminants. Got blood, perfect, thank you. Bye. Good release.
A shark's blood is similar to a human's in that it contains white and red blood cells. The white cells are responsible for the shark's immunological defense against invasive substances.
When an animal has a toxic compound in its body, it sometimes has health issues because of it.
Garcia Barcia is using a purple dye to test for certain biomarkers. The more purple she sees, the healthier the animal.
So here you can see intense purple.
This shark is healthy, but that's not always the case. Her research has shown a shocking cocktail of human-made pollutants present within sharks.
Some of the contaminants or pollutants we find in sharks can be things like heavy metals, arsenic, cadmium, things like that. Also, sometimes we do find pharmaceutical compounds.
If a shark ingests cocaine, research suggests that the consequences for beachgoers could be dire.
A few studies done with cocaine show that it affects fish really different than it affects humans, and that has to do with the fact that cocaine in the water is absorbed differently than cocaine that you would ingest like humans do.
Swiss researchers studying the effects of psychoactive substances gave cocaine to zebrafish. Instead of functioning like a stimulant, it acted as an anesthetic. If cocaine has a similar effect on sharks, it might hamper their ability to hunt their normal prey effectively. Could this force them to go after easier targets, or even humans? As far-fetched as this may sound, when 7 people are preyed upon by sharks in 1 year, nothing can be overlooked. According to Garcia Barcia, it all comes down to how much cocaine there is in the water.
Chemicals like plastics, which are prevalent in our daily life, are going to be in larger quantities in the water, but a bale of cocaine appearing and washing up ashore every now and then is not enough for these animals to have high levels of cocaine in their body. The levels of cocaine in the water are way too low for cocaine to be an issue for sharks.
Some locals like Anna think something else in the water is drawing the sharks in.
I believe that the reason she had gotten bit by the shark that day is because this is known to be a popular fishing spot, and that the fishing is what provoked all the sharks.
This could be important because lately, something strange is happening to fishermen along the Treasure Coast. The Treasure Coast is world-renowned for its sport fishing, with anglers regularly hooking bounty such as giant tarpon and speedy sailfish. It's all part of the state's whopping $9 billion ocean fishing economy. But in recent years, the fishermen have reported a disturbing trend.
A lot of anglers will complain that sharks steal the catch right off their hook.
Oh my God.
According to some locals, this might have unintended consequences.
I think that fishing has a lot to do with the sharks coming in closer to land because they're being fed by these fishermen. They seem to have figured out that there's food here.
Sharks stealing the catch from fishermen's hooks is known as shark depredation. and it's linked to a particular aspect of animal behavior that could be key in understanding the surge in attacks.
We have 27 different sharks in the habitat, 5 different species.
Jim Kinsler manages an aquarium with a large population of multiple types of sharks.
We have the sand tiger shark, the sandbar shark, the nurse shark, the white-tip shark, and the zebra shark.
Each of these species requires a different amount of food. To ensure an orderly feeding process, the staff uses a set of seemingly ordinary objects. 3 different colored cards, each one attached to a pole.
So we have 3 different feeding stations for the different species. We have the green target, where we have all the sand tigers and the nurse sharks. The second feeding station is the red station. That's where we have all the white tips. And then the third feeding station is the yellow feeding station. That's where all of our sandbars and the zebra shark come over to feed.
Essentially, Jim's team has taught or conditioned the hungry sharks to take turns.
When we place these targets out in the environment, the sharks know exactly which target to go to for food.
Sharks learn that a certain set of circumstances or stimuli can lead to a meal. And this conditioning can be so effective that it kicks in even before the food is present. To demonstrate, Jim's colleague places a yellow target into the water.
You can see Darwin, our zebra shark, has already come over to the target. In fact, he did not even need to place a food item in the water. He was associating with the target. He knew that was his feeding location, and he came right over.
Sharks in the wild are conditioned in much the same way. There, the stimulus they might associate with food is the sight of a fishing pole or the sound of a boat motor.
When there's fishing activity out in the ocean, it's like ringing the dinner bell. So they know it's going to be an easy meal, and they'll keep coming back.
In the case of shark feeding or deep predation, sharks can be conditioned to associate boats with food, and this can lead to sharks spending more time in particular locations. If those locations happen to be near beachgoers, this could potentially lead to an increase in human-shark interactions.
Research shows sharks can retain these learned associations for up to a year.
Sharks are opportunistic predators, and they're taking advantage of a vulnerable prey item that just so happens to be reeled in by the person who caught it. But most of the sport fishing occurs in deeper waters, a bit further off the coast.
Whereas all of the attacks occurred in the shallows.
So even if sharks are being conditioned in some way, they're not going to be in proximity to beachgoers. Shark depredation is most likely not the cause of the spike in attacks along the Treasure Coast in 2021.
With that ruled out, the hunt for answers turns to the 7th and final attack of 2021.
I've lived on the Treasure Coast for about 3-4 years now. I love to surf, snorkel, spearfish, dive, anything that really gets me to be in the water.
California native Truman Patrick has spent decades chasing a good set.
So I've been surfing as long as I could remember. I still remember the first wave that my dad pushed me in. That was probably like 20 years ago, but I still remember every moment of it, and every surfer will tell you that. One wave gets you hooked, and you just keep on coming back.
But the waves on this beach carry an entirely different memory. In the afternoon, Truman gears up to go surfing at one of his favorite beaches.
I would say the weather is very similar to what it was like today. Right when I was walking out in the water, I walked through a pretty sizable school of mullet.
Undeterred by the fish, Truman rides a few waves.
The ocean was warm, and it was flat except for perfect little 2-foot, 3-foot waves coming in. But when I'm surfing, I definitely keep my eye out for sharks. There's all sorts of animals that could take a nip out of you. I was sitting on my board and looking around, just checking stuff out. And I saw a pretty big fin.
Truman catches the next wave to try and put some distance between him and the shark.
So I just go to like hop off. That's when it hit me.
The shark's sharp teeth cut into Truman's left foot.
I felt a fast bite. It's like a vice. At first, you don't really feel it. Your adrenaline is really like pumping. I didn't know if I was gonna pass out from blood loss.
On shore, bystanders use a surf leash to attempt to slow the bleeding.
There was a lot of puncture holes. It was just bleeding all over. And then the back of my foot, it was just like peeled open like an orange.
Truman is driven to the hospital. Surgeons save his damaged foot.
Nerves take a long time to heal, so a large part of my foot I still don't really feel. But I'm extremely lucky to be alive. Very, very lucky, very blessed.
Truman is the 7th shark attack victim in 2021 on the Treasure Coast. The year prior, there was just one attack on these shores. A detail from Truman's incident could prove crucial to the investigation.
I have seen lemonheads, blacktips, bull sharks. Did not look like any of those shark fins that I had seen. The fin was tall, but it was so narrow. That's why I think the shark that ended up biting me is a hammerhead.
Hammerheads come in two basic flavors, big and little. And off the coast of Florida, we have the scalloped hammerhead. That's one of the big guys. They can get up to maybe about 9 or 10 feet long. There's also the smooth hammerhead and the little guy, the bonnethead shark.
Regardless of size, attacks on humans by this species are virtually non-existent. But during the time of the spike, Floridians recorded hammerheads exhibiting a very strange behavior.
Look at them. Lean back out.
Typically, hammerheads swim in open water. During the surge in attacks, hundreds of these sharks were seen much farther inshore, in canals.
I've never seen so many.
What is causing these sharks to crowd into these waterways? The answer might help explain the spike in attacks.
Florida's coastal ecosystem is extremely diverse and so special for sharks, but it's also fragile.
Dr. Tracy Fanara is a hydrologist who studies the health of the ocean.
When there's a spike of shark bites, everything is at stake. Sharks are essential to our ecosystem. If we lose the sharks, we lose the ocean, and we lose our ability to live on this planet, basically.
Fanara analyzes water samples from the same time and location where the large schools of hammerheads were seen, and notices something alarming.
This slide indicates the presence of a Florida red tide bloom. Florida red tide is a common name of the species of phytoplankton called Karenia brevis.
A red tide occurs when excess nutrients from wastewater runoff and fertilizers cause the overgrowth of algae in the ocean. When the algae eventually dies, it removes something crucial from the water.
The bacteria that helps with that decomposition process can actually uptake oxygen.
This phenomenon of oxygen removal is called hypoxia, and it triggers a catastrophic wave of marine destruction.
What makes Florida red tide so unique is that it can cause mass wildlife fatalities, everything from fish all the way to manatee, dolphins.
Though red tide can occur periodically, the bloom of 2021 was unique.
This is a very high concentration.
It was one of the worst to hit the Sunshine State in decades. And this may have had a profound impact on the sharks. Like other fish, sharks breathe through their gills, which are respiratory organs akin to our lungs. As water passes over the gills, tiny filaments extract oxygen from the water. But when sharks enter hypoxic areas, they cannot collect enough oxygen to survive, forcing the predators to flee.
Sharks have been known to avoid hypoxic areas where Florida red tide blooms are in high concentrations. And recently, we actually have scientific proof that sharks will seek refuge in canalways, areas that are a lower salinity where Florida red tide can't exist.
These sharks fled the red tide and entered the canals in search of breathable waters. Could something similar be happening along the coast, causing sharks to seek refuge closer to the shore and beachgoers? It wouldn't be the first time. In 2005, red tide is thought to have caused a spike of 11 shark attacks around the Gulf of Mexico. 16 years later, history seems to be repeating itself.
Throughout almost all of 2021, there was a Florida red tide bloom on the west coast of Florida, where sharks were moving into canalways.
However, on the other side of Florida, it's a very different story.
The bloom did not go up the east coast of Florida, so we have no indications of high concentrations of Karenia brevis on the east coast of Florida where these anomaly shark bites happen.
Red tide is not the cause of the spike. But another clue from Truman's attack is going to blow this whole investigation wide open.
Right when I was walking out in the water, I walked through a pretty sizable school of mullet.
Mullet is a type of fish that migrates along the coast of Florida while following a certain path. The Gulf Stream.
The Gulf Stream current is this strong northward flowing current that runs along the entire U.S. eastern seaboard. It's like a corridor. It's like the I-95 of currents.
Traveling along this thoroughfare are countless migrating animals, like fish and sea turtles. They're not the only ones riding the current.
A lot of different species will travel along this Gulf Stream superhighway, including large sharks.
Species like makos and white sharks swim in the Gulf Stream current, about 50 miles out to sea. And this has a vital impact on what happens in the shallows.
Because a lot of the big sharks are off there traveling along the Gulf Stream, a lot of the smaller sharks are avoiding that and staying close inshore. One of the species that hug the shoreline is the blacktip shark.
Each year, blacktips migrate south from New York to Florida. Kajira has spent more than a decade recording this phenomenon.
We flew aerial surveys from Miami up to Jupiter, Florida. What I'm going to show you is some of the drone footage that we've used to collect these data.
This awe-inspiring footage reveals blacktips migrate by the thousands. They travel together in huge schools as part of one of the largest shark migrations on the planet.
You can see how tight they are up against the beach. There's the sharks. You could literally be in waist-deep water and be surrounded by sharks. And so blacktips are responsible for more bites on humans than any other shark species here in Florida.
Typically, the blacktips migrate as far south as Palm Beach or even Miami. But in 2021, the year of the spike, something changed.
If you look at water temperature data for the past 10 years, 2021 was one of the warmest years we've ever had. Water temperature correlates with shark abundance and shark behavior.
Blacktip migrations are triggered by changes in climate. When water temperatures dip below 71 degrees Fahrenheit, the sharks travel south in search of warmer seas. This usually happens in wintertime in the northern hemisphere. During the time of the spike, the waters off the Treasure Coast stayed warm for longer than usual.
The reason this is important is because they're stopping their migration farther north. So whereas we used to have tens of thousands of sharks in Palm Beach County, now they're stopping off the Treasure Coast.
Not only that, Kajira's research suggests the blacktips don't come alone.
The blacktips, they're preyed upon by larger sharks like great hammerheads.
Hammerheads, like the one Truman thinks bit him.
And as a result, you have the potential for a lot more interactions between humans and sharks farther north. And that's where we're getting a lot of these bites taking place, including some of these bites that we saw in 2021 off the Treasure Coast.
The 2021 migration shift also coincided with a global phenomenon that changed the world: the coronavirus pandemic. As beaches reopened, more than 100 million tourists flooded into Florida, a 50% increase from the year before.
More sharks in the area, more people going into the water in 2021 after all the COVID restrictions have been lifted. You've got this perfect storm of lots of sharks, lots of people, and that's what could lead to this increase in the numbers of these incidents.
As experts look to the future, it seems the Treasure Coast's spike in attacks may not be a one-off occurrence.
Things like water temperature are one of the most important environmental parameters that you can look at, because as water temperature rises, you're going to have a lot more potential for interaction with sharks and humans than we have historically.
Within this new reality, scientific research plays an ever more important role in helping the public coexist with these apex predators.
As a result of this finding, it helps us not only to protect people when they go to the beach, but also to protect the sharks.
Bali, Indonesia, a tropical paradise where shark attacks were unheard of. Until 2010, at Balian Beach. 7 terrifying attacks, including a spate of 4 in just over 1 year. What's transformed this surfer's haven into a shark hotspot?
Surfing for me is an escape. Life is hectic, and being out in the surf is one of the only ways I find where I can just clear my mind.
In 2011, Australian Joe Ferrer and his girlfriend Penny are vacationing on the island of Bali.
We're going to get overtaken by a massive bus. And the reason why we were here, right, was the surf and the yoga and just the ability just to kick back and relax.
Known for its towering volcanoes, ancient temples, and epic swells, Bali is one of more than 17,000 islands that make up the Southeast Asian country of Indonesia. The region is home to an astounding display of marine life, including the ethereal manta ray, the venomous blue-ringed octopus, and sharks. A colorful array of predators, like blacktips, whitetips, and gray reef sharks swim here. All social species that school and hunt in large numbers. Despite such dense aggregations, there's never been a single shark attack recorded along Bali's coast until 2010.
Penny was going for a run, and I had got up early to come out for a surf.
Around 7 a.m., Joe paddles out on his surfboard.
It was one of those perfect surf days. I was getting a ton of waves, lefts and rights. And I remember just feeling that perfect sense of relaxation.
After almost 2 hours, Joe thinks about ending his session.
I was tired. I could feel it in my arms and my chest. I had that thought of, shall I paddle in or a couple more waves? There's always a couple more waves.
It would be his last wave of the day.
I dipped my arm in the water. It felt like something had grabbed me and pulled me. It was quite an aggressive force. I instinctively pulled my arm out of the water. Like a split second after that, the shark disappeared. The blood in the water made me really nervous. I was really expecting a second hit. I was just desperate to get to the beach.
Joe manages to reach shore, where the damage becomes apparent.
I looked to my arm and it was just a red mess. There was a big open cut down to the bone on the front of my forearm, and I could see tendons.
Another beachgoer rushes to his aid.
I then definitely started to feel the pain. I was worried that I was going to lose my arm. I couldn't stop thinking about how I would then be able to do the things that I love to do if that happens.
It takes Joe over 4 hours to reach the nearest hospital by cab. A team of surgeons use 120 stitches and save Joe's arm. The attack still haunts him.
And I had to hold my own arm together. It was the more distressing piece.
This is the first time Joe has been back to Bali.
I think you often get these kind of feelings when you're in the water of something's not quite right. And any time now that I get that feeling, I just come in. Since the attack, I'm definitely more nervous of sharks. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't.
Historically, shark attacks along the coast of Bali are unheard of. But in 2011, Joe Ferrer is actually not the first victim. In the 5 months before he was bitten, 2 other surfers are attacked by sharks. And 7 months after Joe's attack, another male is bitten on the hand. 4 incidents in just over 1 year.
The fact that there were 4 attacks in a place where historically there had been 0 attacks reported, that's worrisome. That's something we need to figure out.
Not only that, all 4 incidents occurred at the same place, off the coast of a 3/4-mile stretch known as Balian Beach.
It is not a big place, Balian Beach. It's a community. Everybody knows each other here, and we're all friends. About 90% depend on tourism. People come here for a specific reason. Either they surf or they do yoga.
The unprecedented attacks put the whole community on edge.
I think we need to find out why. Attack happened mostly in Balian. Those who don't understand about shark, like myself, we got really afraid of that.
A lot of my friends don't want to come here and surf anymore. There's been people that have been bitten by sharks here. It is always in the back of the mind.
What's amazing is that all of these attacks occurred within the same small area, which is less than 1% of Bali's entire coastline.
Why is this small beach the most dangerous place for shark attacks in all of Bali? Local resident Eddie Biancardi thinks he may have a lead, a common feature shared by all 4 incidents.
I've been living in Balian for about 15 years. All the shark attacks, in my experience, I've been here for most of them. They've all been early in the morning, but that's the only time when you see the sharks.
This could be important because another marine spectacle occurs in the early morning at Balian Beach, one that attracts spectators, scientists, and some believe sharks. Veterinarian Dr. Windia Adanyana explains.
Bali used to be a home for at least 3 species of marine turtle, but now they're gone. The only species that still nests on Bali Island is what we call as olive ridley turtles.
To aid in the olive ridley's population growth, hatcheries such as this collect vulnerable turtle eggs from nearby beaches. Once the turtles are born, these organizations utilize volunteers to release the hatchlings back into the ocean. And they do so from Balian Beach.
We usually release the turtle mostly early in the morning.
This process can help stave off the extinction of Bali sea turtles. It may also be creating a new problem.
When we release the hatchling into the ocean, we understand that not all of them will survive. Most of them will be predated by birds, by fish, by shark.
Sharks, like the tiger or great white, have powerful jaws that can crack through the hard shell of an adult turtle. A hatchling shell is much softer, making it edible for many different sharks.
The shark will follow the prey inshore, and the closer it comes to shore, the more likelihood it is that the shark is going to encounter a person.
Turtles are released in Bali typically from March to September. Joe Ferrer was attacked in April.
We know that Joe's attack did occur during turtle nesting season, but all of the other attacks actually didn't happen during turtle nesting season when the turtles were being released.
Still, Daily Angle believes this doesn't necessarily rule out turtles as a factor in the spike.
If that stimulus that signals prey to that shark occurs regularly, sharks will learn to come back to the same area again and again.
This behavioral phenomenon is called conditioning. Ed Fenny runs a marine life park in Australia.
We've got 3 lemon sharks, 2 sandbar sharks, 2 nervous sharks, which are our local reef shark, and a beautiful little tiger shark as well.
Every day, Fenny witnesses the extent to which sharks can be conditioned. At feeding time, he always performs the same routine. He gathers fish from the freezer, walks across a bridge, and feeds the sharks using a pole. This process has become ingrained within the shark's memory.
So at the moment, there's no real activity from the sharks. They'll all be sitting on the bottom of the lagoon.
When Fenny crosses the bridge, all of that changes.
I'm going to walk onto this shark bridge with an empty feeding pole. We go, look at the tiger shark, guys, straight away. Awesome. There we go, look, lemon shark, large lemon shark.
Even though Fenny isn't carrying fish, the sharks behave as though he is.
Just the sound of me walking onto this bridge creates a vibration, and the sharks will respond to that vibration, that stimulus, and come to the surface expecting food, because they're conditioned to being fed now.
In the same way, sharks in the wild may have been conditioned to expect prey each morning at Balian Beach. If the turtles aren't present, they might bite a human instead. According to Daily Angle, it's a scenario that's led to shark attacks before.
In 2010, there was a spate of 5 attacks in just 6 days in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. And that's unusual. These attacks could actually have been the result of conditioning, because it turns out scuba divers were carrying food pouches that they would actually use to hand out fish to these sharks. So sharks started to expect these handouts, and they would swim up to people who weren't carrying food pouches, and then they started attacking people in an effort to try and get fed.
Is the same phenomenon occurring in the waters of Balian Beach? Daily Angle digs deeper and discovers that sea turtle releases are not actually unique to Balian Beach.
Turtle releases happen all over the island. And yet, we know that these attacks all happened at the same beach. So there must have been something else going on in this particular place.
Hatchling releases are not to blame.
Right now, we are going to the Blue Corner dive boat, and then we're going to the coral reef around here.
In search of a new lead, marine biologist Egi Pamungkas heads offshore a few miles from the attack site.
So we are just above the coral reef area. We are going to check the condition of the coral reef.
Bali is part of the Pacific Coral Triangle, an area that supports the greatest variety of coral species in the world. The thriving ecosystem is home to more than 2,000 species of fish, including sharks. Not all of Bali's coral looks this way. Pamungkas's dive reveals a reef that is white and barren, or bleached.
When corals bleaching, it's actually in a dying conditions. Coral bleaching happens because of the changes of the temperature, especially the rising temperature in the ocean.
One of the worst episodes of coral bleaching in Bali's history occurred in 2010, just before the spike in shark attacks.
A healthy coral reef will have a healthy shark population.
According to shark scientist Dr. Jonathan Wary, certain sharks feast on the various fish, squid, and crustaceans within the reef. When coral is bleached, predator populations drop.
If there's a bleaching event and that base structure of the coral ecosystem has basically been wiped out, then sharks potentially will move because there may be less prey.
Did the mass bleaching of Bali's coral reef force sharks to find a new hunting ground like Balian Beach?
One of the first things we want to try and establish is, can we determine what species it is?
Wary believes identifying the shark responsible for the attacks will answer whether coral bleaching is to blame.
You can clearly see the top section of the jaw, almost V-shaped.
Wary analyzes Joe Ferrer's bite wound.
In fact, we can get an idea of size. You're sort of talking a mouth with a gape at around 15 centimeters. But what's really interesting is the bottom section. So it's almost like the top of the animal has grabbed him and then it's slipped away as he's moved his arm, which would create that sort of injury. Based on these photos, Joe was very likely bit by a bull shark.
Growing up to 11.5 feet long and armed with a bite force of over 1,300 pounds, bull sharks are known for their aggressive nature and tendency to headbutt prey before attacking.
They have a very big muscle and mouth to body ratio. So when they target prey, and they have these huge banks of white muscle that allow them to give a very powerful and quick ambush. They're just really good at what they do.
Bulls don't typically employ this hunting strategy against humans. In the case of Bali's spike, it seems Joe is not their only victim.
There are consistencies across each attack, which tends to suggest that we're probably dealing with the same species and it's occurring under the same environmental scenarios.
All 4 victims were bitten on the hand or arm while surfing by bull sharks. This predator's distribution pattern is key to understanding whether Bali's coral bleaching forced it to seek out new feeding grounds.
The key difference between bull sharks and other sharks is the bull shark utilizes such a diverse range of habitats. They live in freshwater, salt marsh, mangrove environments, and the coastal area.
Some species like blacktips, whitetips, and gray reef sharks have small home ranges, and depend on the coral reef. Whereas for bull sharks, that environment is just one of many where they hunt.
Bull sharks are constantly moving around. A coral reef that's bleached isn't really a major concern for them. They just simply move on. So the facts suggest that the corals bleaching in Bali are not a fact for the shark attacks at Balam Beach.
The mystery behind the sudden surge remains unsolved. With no answers, the rumors and worries swirl.
I hope this doesn't make people afraid about Balian Beach. We see more fun than scary things like this. It's just unfortunate. And I hope the village will recover fast and everything will be back to normal.
This is a problem that is not going away. In 2016, 5 years after the spate of 4 attacks, there's another terrifying encounter.
This area will always be home to me. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else.
Surf instructor Twiggy Van Ryan has lived at Balian Beach for the last 10 years.
Surfing's basically everything to me.
In April of 2016, Twiggy is introduced to a visiting surfer named Ryan Borman.
Ryan was a young guy from San Diego, mid-20s, nice demeanor. He was a competent surfer. So this is the local restaurant where I was when the attack happened with Ryan, and it happened about 100 yards out from the shoreline. It was a beautiful day, similar to this, really glass conditions. Ordered some food and I was watching some people in the surf. There was only a handful, maybe 4 or 5.
One of the surfers is Ryan Borman.
It just felt like any pretty normal morning here in Balian. Everyone was just enjoying good waves. Ryan was sitting on his board. The shark came up from his side. His elbow ended up in the shark's mouth. When he was hit by the shark, he was also knocked off his board.
The surfer scrambles out of the water.
I saw Ryan paddle one arm back to the beach. Pretty amazing effort, considering the size of the wound to his arm.
Ryan collapses into the sand. Twiggy rushes to his aid.
As soon as I saw the gravity of Ryan's wound, I realized it was much worse than I thought. I definitely moved a lot faster. There was quite a lot of blood. It was pretty gory.
Twiggy helps load Ryan into a local's car, and he's rushed to the hospital.
It was a pretty serious incident.
After 3 surgeries and a year of physical therapy, Ryan makes a full recovery.
He was very lucky to keep his arm. He reached out to me down the track just to say thanks, but I never let it stop me from surfing.
Ryan is now the 5th attack at Balian Beach since 2010. Before that, no attack had ever been recorded on the island. This escalation hits the residents of Balian Beach hard.
The community in Balian Beach definitely get affected when there's an attack. Everything shuts down. The business here, all of a sudden, their income is just cut, like major. And for me, that's a pity. Imagine the families, they rely on putting bread on the table. They can't make the money because there's no tourism.
So I'm taking you to the Balian Beach. We want to have a look at the nearshore area. That will be a key to understanding why there has been some attacks here.
There is a particular feature of Balian Beach that may play a vital role.
This is Balian River. We're right at the river mouth where the Balian River is meeting the beach and the surf zone.
The Balian River is part of a large river system that provides food and recreation for many local communities, though sometimes it carries something less desirable.
I have lived on this river for about 8 years, and I've seen a lot of odd things. I've seen dirty diapers coming down the river, somebody's dumping over the bridge.
Like many countries, Indonesia has a trash problem. In 2010, the year the spike began, the nation was dubbed the second worst ocean polluter in the world. A shocking video captured by an amateur diver off the coast of Bali shows the extent of the issue. It's believed some of the trash infesting the island's coastal waters flows directly from its rivers, like Balian.
Debris finding its way into rivers in the area where shark attacks have occurred is a potential clue to understanding why the attacks occurred.
According to Dr. Dan Huber, it all goes back to a shark's most iconic sense: smell.
Here I have a small specimen of a blacktip shark. We're going to do a dissection of this blacktip shark's olfactory system, and bit by bit, we're going to expose what's inside the nares. A shark's nares are the term that we use to refer to its nostrils.
Unlike mammals, a shark's nostrils are used only for smelling, not for breathing. Water flows into the nares, passes over sensory cells, and then flows back out.
You can see that on this part of the shark's head right here. The nares are actually split between two openings here and here.
Sharks can determine which nostril catches a scent first, even if the difference is only 1/10 of a second. Then they head in that direction to find the source of the smell.
So as sharks are swimming through the environment, they have this continuous process of water flowing in, odors being detected, and water flowing out.
Sharks use this highly adapted olfactory sense to find food.
Sharks are what are known as opportunistic predators. And what that means is that they will take advantage of any locally abundant food source.
Sharks scavenge on dead animals and even trash, like the rubbish discarded near Balian Beach.
Debris along the coastline will draw them into the area so that they can scavenge. And if there are people that happen to be in the water at these times, this could potentially lead to a spike in attacks.
While the Indonesian government is working to improve its marine plastic problem, trash has consistently littered these waters for decades. Whereas the shark attacks only began in 2010. The two issues cannot be related.
Garbage that people toss into rivers and out into the ocean is not responsible for the spike in attacks in Bali.
Shark expert Dr. Toby Daly Engel seeks out a new lead.
When we think about the factors that might be contributing to shark attack, it's really important to look at the whole environment, especially all of the other sea creatures. And Bali is famous because it has a big population of one of the most unusual bony fishes in the entire world, mola mola, or ocean sunfish.
Mola mola are the heaviest bony fish in the ocean, reaching lengths up to 14 feet and weighing over 5,000 pounds.
A mola is basically a swimming head with a tail tacked on. The biggest of them can grow as big as some of the largest sharks.
Though typically a deep water fish, they periodically ascend to the shallows for a strange purpose.
For some reason, mola mola have an incredibly high amount of parasites. 40 different species of parasites. That's a lot. So the birds will actually pick off the parasites from these huge fish in a sort of a symbiotic relationship between the birds and the mola mola.
Birds aren't the only animal eating these parasitic worms.
A bull shark would absolutely prey on a mola mola given the opportunity. It eats the fish, but it also eats those parasites.
Parasitologist Dr. Janine Kyra has spent the past 37 years studying how sharks are affected by parasites.
So today, we're going to be looking at the spiral intestine of a fairly large bull shark to see if I can find some of the tiny little parasites that live attached to that surface.
Unlike mammals who typically have 2 intestines, a shark only has 1. This organ aids in digestion by slowing the movement of food and directing it downward through the gut.
Oh my God, there's one right there. There it is. It's a gorgeous little worm. Look at that. 80% of the species that parasitize sharks are tapeworms.
As seen in these 3D micrographic images, tapeworms are flat, segmented parasites that can be found living within the gut of various animals, including mola mola.
Tapeworms are actually what we call trophically transmitted, and what that means is they move between hosts through the food chain. So any shark that picks up tapeworms is getting it from something they eat.
In some cases, tapeworms can be found inside sharks by the thousands. This could be key to explaining the attacks, because tapeworms can rob their host of nutrients, essentially making the animal hungrier.
Because tapeworms don't have a gut, you almost always find them associated with the gut of their host because that's the only place they're going to get their nutrition.
Are tapeworms passed on from the mola mola, giving bull sharks an insatiable appetite, causing them to turn to unlikely sources of prey, like humans?
So basically, what you're looking at, these are the elements of the surface of the spiral intestine.
Dr. Kyra's research shows that tapeworms affect sharks differently than other animals.
One of the things we've come to realize is that there aren't that many big tapeworms in sharks. For the most part, they're so small. And so what that's showing us is the little tapeworms that live in the shark, they're just absorbing nutrients, and the shark is eating way more than they actually can absorb. The bottom line is there's absolutely no evidence that tapeworms really even cause all that much damage to the shark. So the notion that they might actually be a contributing factor to the increase in shark attacks in Bali, it just seems very, very unlikely to me.
The investigation comes up empty, and another surfer is attacked. In 2017, Dan Moore and his family are enjoying their vacation at Balian Beach, unaware of the recent shark attacks on these shores.
Definitely a family vacation, just a really relaxing time. Enjoy the culture, the food, obviously the surfing.
Surfing is a passion enjoyed by both the Australian paramedic and his 15-year-old son, Max.
We have a great relationship, father-son.
Though not all of their shared memories are happy ones.
I'm reminded every day about what happened to me.
Around 7 a.m., Dan and Max head for the water's edge, despite a feeling of unease.
I distinctly remember paddling out going, I'm not going to be out here for too long today. Just a bad vibe.
Dan shrugs it off and begins to surf.
The conditions are really good, the winds were light, it's a beautiful setting. I got about 200 yards out to sea from the shoreline. I had my arm in the water and I just turned to watch my son catch a wave. And as I turned, the water around me had exploded. Had no warning.
A shark bites down on Dan's hand.
I could really only see its dorsal fin and its head out of the water latching down onto my hands. I'll never forget the force of it, how powerful it hit. I thought I was probably going to lose my hand. Max didn't hesitate. He paddled straight over towards me. Obviously, he had concerns about Max. I was thinking, he's now in danger. I knew I had to get it off. And I punched it in the head.
Dan hits the shark repeatedly until it finally releases.
Once I got to the shore, the adrenaline drops, the pain hits, the whole enormity of the situation has really kicked in. And I instantly thought that I'd lost my fingers.
Dan is rushed to the nearest hospital, where he undergoes 4 hours of microsurgery to repair 5 severed tendons in his hand.
I still suffer from nerve damage, and there's certainly a numbness across my hand. I'll probably have that for the rest of my life. From Max's point of view, I owe so much to him. I've asked him several times what was going through your head, mate. He said, I wasn't thinking about the shark. Never thought once about the shark. He said, all I thought about was you. It's pretty brave. It's very brave.
Dan is the 6th person to be attacked at Balian Beach since 2010. In June of 2022, a Russian woman is added to the list. Like those before her, the victim was surfing when she was attacked by a bull shark. Without a reason for these 7 attacks, Balians are left to wait, wonder, and worry.
The last shark attack was a Russian girl who got bit, and there is a pretty big community of Russians living in Bali. That definitely got a lot of publicity, so they stopped kind of coming to Balian as far as surf schools, which has affected the amount of tourists that do come here.
In search of a new lead, Dan Huber analyzes the dates of each attack.
It's important to look at the timing of these events because we can see whether or not it coincides with other events that have happened in the environment.
Before long, a potential correlation emerges.
The 7 shark attacks that have occurred during the spike in Bali since 2010 cluster into 3 distinct periods of time, from 2010 to 2011, 2016 to 2017, and 2022. And each of those time periods also had an oceanic earthquake.
Bali is located within a region of the Pacific Ocean known as the Ring of Fire. This arc of fault lines is prone to frequent volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, accounting for roughly 90% of all earthquakes worldwide. The oceanic earthquakes that align with Bali's shark attacks were particularly strong, each measuring above a 6.0 on the Richter scale.
Earthquakes represent a massive release of energy in the environment as tectonic plates shift past each other. And when these happen in the ocean, seismic energy is converted into acoustic energy, which is called tertiary or T-waves.
As T-waves travel through the ocean, certain marine life can detect these sounds.
T-waves are in the range of about 5 to 100 hertz, and this is right at the low end of the sensitivity range for shark hearing. Sharks can definitely hear earthquakes in the aquatic environment.
Sharks hear using an inner ear that is located via small openings on the top of its head. When sound waves reach the inner ear, tiny hair cells vibrate and send signals to the brain for interpretation.
Sharks use their sense of hearing to help them hunt because their ears are built to detect vibrations in the water. They can locate the source of those sound waves, which is often a prey item.
A controlled habitat is an ideal place to demonstrate how sharks react to certain sounds. Ed Fenney believes a key component to consider about an earthquake is volume.
Earthquakes in the ocean create very, very loud, abrupt sounds.
To show how this may impact sharks, Fenny uses an air horn.
So the idea with the air horn, it'll emulate that sudden, loud noise.
This air horn creates underwater sounds of 103 decibels. Underwater earthquakes can produce sounds of 210 decibels. Any reaction the sharks have to this air horn may be even more pronounced with an earthquake.
Reese has just strapped an air horn to the bottom of the shark bridge. I'm going to lure the sharks in with a bit of food, and then using this pole, I'll very carefully touch the top of the air horn. We'll get, again, that abrupt sound. Here we go. Okay, getting closer to the air horn now. I'm going to set up the air horn. Amazing, look, look, look. Look at that. Really did not like that one bit. Swam away as fast as he could. And what it's demonstrating is that sharks are deterred by large abrupt sounds, similar to what we'd see if an earthquake were to happen in the wild.
The seaquakes that align with Bali's attacks all occurred offshore from the attack site. Is the loud sound of these tremors repelling sharks and forcing them into new places, like Balian Beach?
The timing of shark attacks in Bali coincided with 3 different earthquakes that happened in the area of Indonesia. But there have also been a bunch of other Indonesian earthquakes that did not coincide with shark attacks in Bali.
During the time of the spike, thousands of earthquakes rocked Indonesia without a corresponding uptick in incidents.
Earthquakes are probably not the reason for the spike in shark attacks in Bali.
While earthquakes are not the answer, this analysis reveals a key clue. The attacks occurred within 3 distinct time periods.
All right, we're ready. Jump in.
Dr. Jonathan Wary believes the connection between these clusters may be found within the river abutting the attack site, and a strange animal that appeared shortly before the final incident.
So during the spate of shark attacks in the surf zone, a crocodile was found in a Bali river very similar to this one.
Crocodile sightings in Bali are incredibly rare due to the island's dense population. But during periods of heavy rainfall, rivers carrying nutrients flood into the ocean, drawing in crocodiles looking for food.
So the potential occurrence of a crocodile here could actually be a symptom of heavy rains from La Nina.
La Nina is a weather pattern that can occur in the Pacific Ocean and is defined by stronger than average winds. These powerful winds blow warm water at the ocean's surface toward Indonesia and can lead to increased rainfall.
So as it turns out, each cluster of attacks occurred during a La Nina event.
Like crocodiles, Wary believes that La Nina could also impact bull sharks. It all depends on the measurement of one key element.
Taking salinity readings in a river system is a really powerful means to get a better handle on how bull sharks might be using that system and where they're most likely to be found.
Unlike most large sharks, bull sharks are often found within rivers because they thrive within the brackish environment, where salt water meets fresh. Their preferred salinity range is 10 to 30 PSU.
So, yep, 10.4. So that's perfect. That's exactly what I'd be looking for.
Today, the salinity at the mouth of the Balian River is excellent for bulls. During the spike, that wasn't the case.
Due to the heavy rains. When you have a La Nina event, so you got this huge gush of fresh water going right down the river, right out to sea. That salinity stratification is completely changed. It's like the slate is wiped clean, and it's all the same salinity.
the river water becomes too fresh for bulls, causing them to relocate.
Bull sharks are essentially chasing their preferred salinity all the way into coastal waters.
That's only the beginning of the problem.
So when you have a river system that is flowing out, in a La Nina event, you get that particularly dirty water that comes out. It's quite distinct.
Not only is murky water a favorite spot for bull sharks to hunt, this dirty plume is ripe with nutrients that can attract baitfish that bulls prey upon.
That becomes a potential hotspot for bull shark feeding, and that is at a period where the risk of a shark interaction is a lot higher. La Nina alters the salinity stratification of the Baleine River and then flushes the bull sharks out into the nearshore area, and at the same time is attracting other bull sharks in from the ocean. And surfers are literally in the middle of that sandwich.
Since the river at Baleine Beach isn't going away, the sharks likely aren't either. With this knowledge, beachgoers can better understand how to share these waters and stay safe.
Now I'm far more cautious about where and when I will surf. Avoid surfing after really heavy downpours, especially in river mouth areas. They're good lessons to take on board everywhere in the world.